Hello, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about my personal history with Japan because this year marks the 25th year that I've been travelling there. My very first trip was back in 2000, and as you would imagine, quite a lot of things have changed since then. So this video I'm going to talk about the things that have made Japan a different place to visit now, in many ways better, but in a few ways worse. I'm going to start with the good things. Number one is it is far easier. 25 years ago, if you were going to visit Japan, you really needed either to speak Japanese or have a good guide who did. And that's because back then, very few people spoke English. Even in hotels, quite often, people couldn't speak English unless it was a reasonably big hotel. And of course, all maps were in Japanese, and the vast majority of signs didn't have any English translation on them either, except for really important ones like in the airport. Whereas now it's usually not too hard to find someone who speaks at least a reasonable amount of English, and they do teach it at school a lot more than they used to. Also, younger people in Japan now are less shy about trying to speak to you in English. And now most of the major cities have English on all the signs. Around places like train stations, you'll even find they have Chinese and Korean as well as English. So it's certainly a lot easier to figure out how to get around. And of course, now you can use Google and other apps to show you how to get around the city, which train to get on, which platform to get on it from. All of this stuff was very hard to do for me 25 years ago when I hadn't started learning Japanese yet. Here's a photo of me, actually, 27 years of age, 25 years ago. And if it seems like a strange selfie, bear in mind they hadn't invented the word selfie yet. I would have taken this photo with a film camera, in fact. Speaking of phones, back then Japan had a completely different type of mobile phone network to every other country in the world, so your phone was useless there. You couldn't just buy a SIM because it wouldn't work. About the only option you had really was to rent a phone at the airport, which you then have to bring back on your way out. I actually never did that. I got a prepaid phone, which was not actually something you could do as a foreigner. I got a friend of mine in Japan to buy it for me because it had to be registered to their address. They did it that way to stop people using them for crime, basically. So every time I went there, I had to recharge the prepay. And here is that phone, little old flip phone. They were interesting in a way. They let you do email, and of course, they let you write in Japanese or English. But of course, there was no camera on them and no navigation or anything like that. Another thing that didn't really work back then was credit cards. I mean, they worked, but almost nobody accepted them. You could use them for renting a car. If you're in a reasonably large hotel, they'd accept them, and some fancy restaurants would take them, but almost nowhere else did. So you had to carry quite a lot of cash with you when you went to Japan, or get a lot of cash changed once you got there. These days you can use them in most places. I've been to a few supermarkets and other shops that still don't accept them. But even taxis now will accept them in most places in Japan. You can also go to pretty much any 7-Eleven and withdraw cash from your Visa card. Whereas the first time I went to Japan, in all of Osaka City, there was only one ATM that would allow you to withdraw cash from a Visa card. A few years later, you were able to withdraw cash at a post office from a credit card. But again, you could really only do that if you spoke Japanese. So basically, everything about getting around in Japan has become a lot easier now. People get around using their phone for everything, getting it to do translation for them, using Google Lens to read signs that are in Japanese. And of course, now you can just get an eSIM or buy a SIM at the airport when you arrive and use your phone as normally. And you can get a plan that gives you all of the data that you need. 25 years ago, the only way you could use the internet really in Japan was going to an internet cafe. Even Wi-Fi wasn't really a thing yet. That came in the early 2000s. So if you had your laptop with you and you wanted to use it at a hotel, you had to bring an Ethernet cable with you and plug in. A lot of other technology wasn't quite available yet either in 2000. I originally started going to Japan because I was the editor of a car magazine, which specialized in Japanese performance cars. So I was going there for a few years, about 3 or 4 times a year to get material for the magazine. And as I said back then, I was shooting with a film camera. Digital cameras hadn't really gotten good enough for magazine use at that point. And I was shooting on slide film, which was a bit more difficult than print film, but it gave better results in the magazine. The following year, I started bringing a video camera with me so that I could make videos about the Japanese car scene. And of course, that was a mini DV digital camera back then. That was the best thing you could get. And the first few videos that I produced were on VHS tape because DVDs were around, but not everyone had a DVD player yet. So it wasn't really until about 2003 that we started releasing them only on DVD. Now I could probably produce better quality videos just using my phone, and I could probably edit them on the phone and upload them faster than I ever did back then. So apart from everything being much easier, another thing that has improved for me is that there's not so much smoking. Back then you could smoke in pretty much any restaurant or bar, and the air was just thick with smoke everywhere you went. The percentage of people smoking in Japan back then must have been more than 50%, whereas now I think it's less than 10. These days, you go out and you don't come home smelling of smoke. So I find it a lot more pleasant. It's a bummer for people who do smoke, I'm sure, but for the rest of us, it's a big improvement. Another thing that is different now compared to back in the early 2000s is the price of housing. Back then, although the economic bubble had already burst, it was still very expensive to buy an apartment or buy a house in Japan. Even in rural areas, it didn't seem cheap like it does now. Of course, this has helped for me by the yen being quite weak, so everything seems a bit cheaper. But even so, the accommodation in particular, as long as you aren't right in the middle of the city, I think is really cheap. I mean, where I bought my Akiya, 1 hour from Osaka, you can rent either a small house or a large apartment for about 10,000 yen a week. The same kind of accommodation 1 hour out of Sydney in Australia would cost you 6 or 7 times as much. So, in my mind, all of those things are better now. But what about things that are worse? Unfortunately, almost everything else in Japan is more expensive now than it used to be back then. None more so than cars. I used to buy a lot of JDM cars in Japan and import them to Australia. The sort of cars I used to buy in those first 10 years, back then they were all under 1 million yen. Now they're up around 4 or 5 million yen, sometimes more. So, whereas back then they were a bargain and I bought quite a lot of them, wouldn't even consider it now. They're just not good value anymore. Which is why now I'm more interested in Akiyas than I am in Japanese cars. Before I get off the cars, though, another thing that has changed for the worse is there are nowhere near as many car racing tracks in Japan as there used to be. Probably a good third of them have closed down in the last 20 years, particularly during COVID. A lot of them closed. Places like Sendai Highland or Sekia Hills are now solar farms. The sign of the times, obviously. People aren't buying performance cars as much as they used to. These days, the most popular type of car in Japan is a van. Most of the other negative changes I've noticed in Japan recently are a result of increased tourism. 25 years ago, because it was so hard to get around in Japan, there were very few foreign tourists. I'll show you a few pictures here. It's a case of try to spot the foreigner. If you do look hard enough, you might spot one, but all of the tourist spots that are very popular now are nowhere near as crowded back then. And as a result, the atmosphere when you went to a place like that was completely different. You really felt like you were in grassroots Japan, whereas now you're just another tourist. And back then, if you went somewhere more obscure, like some of the more far-flung racetracks I used to go to, I'd literally be the only gaijin in about a 50-kilometre radius, and people would look at you like a proper alien had landed on Earth. And I found that kind of fun. But you just won't get that kind of experience anymore. The increase in numbers also affects things like how long it takes to get through airport security. It's harder to get into restaurants because there's so many people. And unfortunately, it also has led to a different perception of foreigners in Japan. The sheer numbers means that there's a larger number of people making sort of cultural gaffes and making Japanese people feel uncomfortable by the way they behave. And unfortunately, that reflects badly on all foreign tourists. Live streamers on YouTube, unfortunately, probably have the worst reputation for that, so I avoid doing anything that even looks like I'm live streaming when I'm filming there. The term Meiwaku Gaijin, which basically means troublesome foreigner, was something I'd never heard when I used to go to Japan back then, but now it's become a common phrase, which is why I had this t-shirt made. It says, Meiwaku Gaijin dewa nai, meaning I'm not a troublesome foreigner. My Japanese friends all found it pretty amusing, But the idea behind it is just to show I'm trying to be considerate and respect local rules and customs. Here's what it looks like on the back, a little bit smaller on the front. So if you're interested in one of those, drop me a message below and I'll let you know how you can get one. So I don't want to go on too long, but that's what I think has changed in Japan in the last 25 years. Personally, I don't think it's changed too much yet, and most changes are for the better. But feel free to comment with your perspective. Thanks for watching to the end, and I will catch you next time.